One of the things most people notice about progressive characters is that they're always villains. No matter how much the writer tries to paint the protagonist as a hero, the character's actions end up looking villainous. The characters are selfish, narcissistic, cruel, power-hungry, and incredibly bigoted. If you go down the line of their premier characters, you'll find at least 2 of those traits, and they're always presented as good things. Now, when people like me point this out, we get called istophobes and Uncle Toms and borderline white supremacists, but never wrong because we're not. This is how many progressives write characters. They're basically villains. We've seen this with the Batwoman TV show. We've seen this with WandaVision. I've got numerous reviews of comics where the people we're supposed to be rooting for are terrible people. So what happens when one of them writes a villain? Well, if that villain's a straight white man, they're written as evil because straight white men are inherently evil. Duh. But if the villain is not a straight white man, then SJWs see that villain as a hero. Not an anti-hero, not even an anti-villain, but literally a hero. Someone who's doing the right thing no matter what. We saw this with Macho Man Abby Savage, and most recently in Falcon and Winter Soldier, with the terrorist Carly being presented as doing the right thing by murdering people. The reason we see this is because these people, these SJW writers, are projecting their views into the characters. The character is nothing more than a mouthpiece, and SJWs don't realize that they are the villains. In fact, they're so oblivious to it that they side with the villains, arguing that the villains have the right ideas. Think Killmonger from Black Panther, which leads to stupid comments like this tweet, quote, "When mutants are introduced in the MCU, I want Magneto to be African American, and his motivations all stem from everything we've all had to endure being black in America." This nigga here. Okay, white folks, I want you to know that all black people ain't this dumb. Some black folks, okay, a lot of black folks are this retarded. But some of us have functioning brains, and we try to keep these ignorant ass niggas out the way, but then y'all dumbasses create shit like Twitter giving them a voice, so whose fault is it really? You could have left his ancestors in Africa and you wouldn't have to deal with this, but you chose otherwise. As for Pookie's dumbass argument, the whole point of Magneto is that he's wrong. His methods are wrong. His actions are wrong, and his ideas are wrong. His motivations could be completely understandable, but we don't judge the ethics and morality of someone's actions based on their motivations. We judge them on the nature and the effect of what they're doing, specifically whether those actions harm other people. Magneto hates humans. He sees mutants as a separate, better species and wants to rule over humanity, and if that won't work, kill them all. He's ruthless in his cruelty, being willing to kill innocent people, even children, who pose no threat to him. He's also indiscriminate in his violence, making no effort to avoid killing the powerless. The sole exception appears to be the racial group he belongs to, Jews. Those are the only humans he will spare. Everyone else is fucked. Now originally, Magneto's motivations came from him just being a generic villain who wanted to dominate the world. Later there was a focus on mutant supremacy, and later the retcon making him Jewish, which added a new dynamic. His motivations were now born out of a desire to prevent a mutant holocaust on par with the Jewish holocaust he survived, which makes his villainy all the more tragic and ironic because he's become the very xenophobic racist murderer he despises. That dynamic is perfect. You couldn't find a better allegory than having a Holocaust survivor become a xenophobic totalitarian who wants to kill so-called inferior people. There's no need to change this, notwithstanding that Magneto would need to be nearly 100 years old for him to have been a boy during the Holocaust. But it's Marvel, so he could be de-aged, he could be a clone. They can find any number of ways to make that work. Making him black, as Pookie wants, changes the dynamic because no one's tried to wipe out all black people. Slavery isn't unique to the black experience. Most cultures have some form of it, and quite a bit of it was racially based. The very word slave comes from the ethnic group of Slavs. They were enslaved to such a point that their name became the word we use to describe forced servitude. You could try to play this somewhat with the Jim Crow laws or general racism in America, but it pales in comparison to someone literally trying to wipe out all Jews. And that would be what Magneto would be doing. He'd want to kill all humans, not for them simply stepping out their place, but for simply existing, which was not the black experience in America. The switch also brings in another problem. He probably wouldn't attack all humans, not because that wouldn't be his character, but because the writers, being far left, would focus on race, so Magneto would probably just target white people. He would also probably target white mutants, attacking them for their perceived ability to blend in. All of this is already in the X-Men stories, by the way. You already have mutants whose mutations are obvious, and they're treated worse than those who can pass as normal humans. So there's no reason to play this out along racial lines, but if you're an SJW, that would be what you would do, and you would never present Magneto's actions as wrong. He would always be justified no matter what he did because racism. Don't take my word for it. Just look at how the left presented the violence committed by BLM and Antifa during the summer of 2020. All that racially motivated violence targeted at white people was and continues to be excused and even supported by the left, sometimes even by government officials. They don't see it as evil to beat someone, shoot someone, run someone over, or kill someone because they're white. It's just black people acting out their frustrations. And make note of that word because it's going to come up again. So, someone who's Jewish pointed out the problem of erasing the most notable character associated with the Holocaust, to which Pookie replies, quote, "And that's fine, because as a black man who's had nothing but harassment, racism, enslavement, and outright murder in this country, I'd like to see a villain who represents all my frustrations." You do realize the villain is the bad guy, right? You're not supposed to root for him because he's doing the wrong thing. If he represents your frustrations, that means your frustrations are wrong and motivated by evil. Maybe you didn't think this through. I mean, I know your struggle is real. So real. But you do know who you sound like, right? Do you even care? That's a rhetorical question. I know the answer is no. He's literally talking like a villain and he doesn't even realize it. Like most SJWs, he sees himself as a victim, and that justifies whatever he wants to do. And what he wants to do is violent, sadistic, and motivated by hate. In other words, villainous. So it's not surprising that he, like many SJWs, identify with the villain and sees the villain's perspective as representative of his own. By the by, these are the same people accusing everyone else of being Nazis. They're actually identifying with the mutant version of a Nazi, but they're calling everyone else a Nazi. SJWs don't realize that they're the villain in every story. They're the ones who want to take revenge on the world for some, usually perceived, slight, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process. Their worldview is the right worldview because it came from them, so it can't be wrong, even when that means identifying with a mass-murdering racist supervillain. If you see Magneto and you think his ideas and his actions represent you, you're a terrible human being, and no one should trust you. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.